So it goes without saying half of the video game experience isn't just dedicated to the images that you see, but also to the sound effects and background music that you're listening to while you're playing this game. I mean, just turn down the volume or mute the audio on some of your favorite video games and just see how boring they become. So all the energy you put into amazing visuals, make sure you put just as much energy into creating great sounds and music. So this video is going to be dedicated to figuring out how we can play sounds and music inside GameSalad. So before we do anything, we have to have some music assets to work with. So you notice that we've been on the Behaviors tab. We want to actually import some sounds. So I'll click on the Sounds tab. And just like we've been creating actors, there's this plus icon here at the bottom where we can import some sounds. So in this case, let's start with a sound effect. So I'll just click on the bonus point and open that up. And this pop-up shows up, and GameSalad's essentially asking you to help GameSalad understand, is this a music file or a sound effect? And basically the way you want to look at it, if it's very short and it is a sound effect, maybe collecting a coin or a character jumping on another character, you're going to import it as a sound. But if it's a long background music that plays continuously for a while, it's of course going to be music. So import as sound. So just use your judgment in that. And you can see we've brought this sound file in, which we can press this little play button here to preview it. Because we don't have visual icons for these sounds, we need to be able to figure out what they are by simply previewing it here. So that's great, but how do we basically get something to trigger that sound? Well, we'll create an actor. I'll double click on that actor, and let's add a rule, create a rule. And let's do when this actor is touched. Now again, we were reviewing these rules earlier, so if you're not familiar with what I'm doing here, back up a few videos where I start to explain rules for the first time. So this rule is very simple. It's saying when this actor, actor 1, receives a touch, then what do we want to happen? Well, in this case, we can just drag the sound, this is kind of a shortcut, into this area, and it automatically puts the play sound behavior. But let me not get ahead. So again, we created a rule, and if we go back to our behaviors, just so we know where it is, we have this play sound behavior, which I can drag in there. So I kind of showed you the way to cheat, but I also want to show you this way as well, where now we can choose the sound that we want to work with. And because we only imported one sound, we only have one sound in this list. But just pay attention to if we imported a whole bunch of sounds and we had 20 or 30 different sounds, then this list would be quite extensive. So make sure you're naming all of your sounds exactly what you want them to be so you can figure out what they are later when you bring them into GameSalad. Okay, so very simple rule here. When this actor is touched, we're going to play this sound. So let's see what happens when I drag my actor into my stage. We press preview. We don't hear anything. But what happens when I click or touch on the actor? We play the sound. I can click it a few times rapidly. So you can imagine now we kind of have a bonus point sound, but that could be a gunfire or any sort of rapid fire thing that we can get to react very, very quickly. So just a few attributes here. We have volume. Often you're going to want all of your sounds kind of exactly where they are when you bring them into GameSalad. You don't want to have to tweak these things here. Just like graphics, you don't want to tweak graphic sizes in GameSalad. You want to make sure you get everything perfected outside in something like Photoshop when you bring them into GameSalad, so you can just worry about assembly. But if you do need to do a little bit of tweaking, you can of course tweak the volume. And of course something that's fun to work with is pitch as well. So I'll just change the pitch. We'll go from 1 to 10, and if I click on that, you can barely hear that. It sounds like a cricket. So 0, we're going to get nothing. And then you can hear now we've made it very, very low. So where this is really powerful, even though I said you should tweak all of your graphics and audio and get them perfected outside GameSalad, is that you can actually reuse the sound in different ways. And in one way, it might sound really low. And then in another option, using that same sound, we can get it to sound a very different way. So you can reuse these elements, and you're going to want to recycle as much as you can when you're doing game development so all of your games run efficiently. So that's getting a sound set up. Now let's talk about music. So again, we need to get some music inside GameSalad. So we'll go back to the Sounds tab, click on the plus icon, and I'll just select this circus loop, and we'll open that up. And this time we're going to import it as music, so GameSalad knows the difference. And again, we can preview it here. And then we'll just go ahead and stop that. And let's go back so that we can edit this actor. Again, our actor is completely empty here, and we want to add a behavior. Now we can just drag and drop play music in here, and we can choose the circus loop. Again, because we brought that in, if we had brought in many different music selections, this list would be quite extensive. So we'll just click circus loop, and we can choose whether we want this to play through once or we want it to loop. And let's click preview. So you can see right away it's playing the music. And again, that's because if we look inside the actor, if we're kind of reading all of our rules and behaviors from top to bottom, we see that right away without any sort of trigger, the music is playing. But let's say we want to trigger something. Well, we can do the same thing that we did with the sound. We can create a new rule. And this rule can be when a keyboard button is pressed. And in this case, the keyboard button I'm going to choose is the space bar. We can play this music. So when the space bar is pressed, we want to play this music. So let's preview that. So we don't hear anything, and now I'm going to tap the space bar. So great, that's working perfectly. As we've seen in earlier videos, you can duplicate these rules. I'm just going to hold the Alt or Option key and click on the top of the title here, drag that rule down. And now what we want to do is actually delete this play music, and we want to drag pause music in there. So we also want to change the key here, so we can't use spacebar to play and pause the music simultaneously. So what we're going to do is switch over to something like the return key. So again, simple rules. Our first rule says when the spacebar is pressed, we want to play this music. And when the return key is pressed, we want to pause this music. So let's see what happens when we preview. So I'll press the space bar, the return key, again the space bar, and again the return key. And there we go. So that is how we can start and stop music. Now I use keyboard triggers to do this, but again, as you've been watching these videos, you can see that we're starting to build up a really amazing library in our head here of things that we can use to trigger things, either collisions, keyboards, or timers can actually create things. So if you can use your imagination a little bit, you can imagine a character might move across a level and there might not be any music playing, but then it might get into a dangerous part of the level and you want to start playing the dangerous music. And you can use a collision to trigger that, a timer to trigger that. Just use your imagination. So again, learning these very simple rules step by step is going to make you an awesome game designer when working inside GameSalad.